Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to the Lepanto Institute's Anchor Team. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, and here is my guy in the sidecar, Jim Mon.
How you doing?
All right. Just a couple of quick updates to let you know that our website is back up and humming. So those of you who have been clamoring to find out what organizations are on our charities list so that you know who to give to and who not to, everything's back up and running. We are now adding a few new things, and I'm going to give you another update here in a few minutes. But why don't we go ahead and launch in with our prayer. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostri. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory.
Pray for us.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right. First things first, as I mentioned with the charity reports list, we have a new charity that we are about to put up on the list. It is Food for the Poor. Many of you have been asking us to look into Food for the Poor. It took us a long time because there are some things that had leads, and we went down a lot of rabbit holes, and it was kind of difficult to find exactly what we were looking for. And what we discovered is enough to cause us concern so that they are not on our recommended list. We are not recommending them. We're going to put the article up next week, so you can go ahead and read the whole thing for yourself. I'm not going to rehash it here. But bottom line is we do not recommend Food for the Poor. The report as to why will be up next week. So keep your eye on the website, and you will find that out very shortly. The next thing I wanted to let you know is that we are in the final phase of our research on Caritas Internationalis and its sister organization called CIDSE. We have a major report on these organizations that are going to be coming out in the next few weeks, so please keep your eye out for that. And the last thing I want to mention is that now that the summer crunch has come to a close, I'm no longer riddled with illness, and my travel schedule has come to a halt. I can now work on developing our new program, which is going to be called Catholics Against Communism. I'm very excited about it. I know Jim's very excited about it. We're working on the outline and putting the whole thing together. It should take around 6 months for us to complete, hopefully, God willing. But that's the next thing that we're going to be working on. And for those of you who are not familiar, who may not have participated in an Anchor Team program before, I want to welcome you. This is the Lepanto Institute Anchor Team, where we meet each Friday to discuss a matter, to discuss various matters of import and interest to faithful Catholics. And if you enjoy this evening's discussion, I'm going to put the link down in the bottom. If you enjoy this evening's discussion and you would like to participate and become a member of the Anchor Team, it's just $15 a month, which is 50 cents a day. All the money that we raise through the Anchor Team goes to help fund the activities of the Lepanto Institute. It's really how we keep the research and the investigations that we do going. So this is our way of saying thank you to our regular supporters. And if you would like to join, here is the link in the comment section here. You just go to lepantoin.org/anchor-team. So if you'd like to be a member, just click the link or type it in your URL. Boy, that's hard to say. And you can join. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into tonight's topic, which is on the heresy of Americanism and the Democrat Party. So to start things off, I'm going to turn things over to Jim, who's going to give us an overview as to what we're going to be talking about and the various things that are going to go along with it. So Jim, go for it.
Mr. Hitchborn, I thank you, sir. And tonight we ask a question: if it's possible to be a member of the Democratic Party and still be Catholic. Now, tragically, the question itself for many Catholics would be rather odd. Basically, one would be confused by the question, as in, of course, why why would a membership in a political party like the Democratic Party be an issue with one's standing as a faithful Catholic? Now, besides many Democratic politicians regularly declaring their Catholicism with no one from the hierarchy challenging this, besides many priests and bishops are members and regularly appear publicly with Democratic leaders. Cardinal Dolan has been seen with Andrew Cuomo many times. Wilton Gregory gives communion to Joe Biden. Even Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, who's not a Catholic, is not even Catholic, has been given communion by Cardinal Cupich. Now, being aligned with the Democratic Party is in direct opposition to the Catholic faith. Tonight, we will look at several areas outlining why voting or supporting this political platform is in direct opposition to Catholic values, arguably can be an indication of grave sin. We'll discuss the Democratic Party's stated platform on their website for the world to see. They certainly don't hide it. We will talk about the history of the United States and the overt prejudice towards Catholics since the beginning. Very interesting. And this is central to understanding the background and context and history of this issue. But to understand any of this, we must start with the concept of Americanism put forth by Leo XIII in 1899. Now, Pope Leo saw clearly the dangers of modernism. He feared the Catholic Church in America was becoming the American Catholic Church. As we will see tonight, his fears proved to be quite prescient. Before we dive into Americanism, it's worth pointing out why we need to fully grasp the background of this seeming ubiquitous way of thinking. And there are two fundamental reasons. The first is so we can defend the deposit of faith, which is our solemn duty. The second, related to the first, is to correctly execute those duties, we must have an understanding of the incremental diabolical march as to how exactly we got here. All right, now I'm going to hand it back to Hitch to give extremely important context on this question. What is Americanism? Hitch, take her.
All righty. So what is Americanism? Now, as Jim mentioned, in 1899, Pope Leo XIII wrote an encyclical, and the encyclical was titled Testem Benevolenti Nostrae, which means a witness to our benevolence. You have to remember, encyclicals always start with the title of them is usually the first three words of the encyclical. So, a witness to our benevolence concerning new opinions, virtue, nature, and grace with regard to Americanism. Now, it was written in response to the biography of a Father Isaac Thomas Hecker. Father Hecker had died just 11 years prior to the encyclical, and somebody wrote a biography about him, and it was translated into French, and a bunch of French seminarians and priests had started to read the biography of Father Hecker, and they were starting to become enamored with some of the ideals that were entrenched in them. And what's interesting is that a lot of these French priests and seminarians kind of started to adopt the various founding ideologies of modernism. So a little about Father Hecker. An American Catholic priest, he founded the Paulist Fathers. Now, you might have heard of Paulist Press. And if you've never heard of them, I can just tell you, they're a mess. What's very interesting to me is I was doing this research and looking into Paulist Press and the Paulist Fathers. Paulist Press, which published a ton of modernist literature in their catalog, is very highly connected with the heretical AUSCP, the Association of United States Catholic Priests. So you can kind of see the fruits of the mission of Father Hecker. Anyway, Father Hecker is considered a blessed. The cause for his canonization has been started, mostly because I think the leftists are trying to canonize his liberalism. He founded the Missionary Society of St. Paul the Apostle, which is known as the Paulist Fathers. The purpose of the society was to try and convert America to the Catholic Church. So a lofty ideal, a lofty desire. The problem was that his approach was linked to an odd new theological outlook. Father Hecker believed that the Catholic faith and the American political culture of small government, property rights, civil society, and liberal democracy were not opposed, but could be reconciled to the church. the ideas of individual freedom, community, service, and authority were absolutely fundamental to what Father Hecker was trying to come up with. And it was integrated into how the polists would be governed and administered. Now, a lot of this sounds pretty okay, civil liberties, property rights, small government, these are all good things. However, the way he was approaching the idea of integrating these ideals into Catholic ideology, it really kind of formed the backdrop for what later became the definition, or what became the definition of Americanism according to Pope Leo XIII. So Leo XIII, in the encyclical, he splits the definition of Americanism into two aspects. One, which could be understood in a manner that's acceptable to Catholic teaching, and the other, absolutely not. So what I'm going to present to you here are just some paraphrases of the encyclical, and I will tell you where I'm quoting directly from the encyclical, but I paraphrase just because it's quite long and it would take us all night to go through it. So on the positive side, according to Pope Leo XIII, Americanism can mean the honor of the American people, the condition of our commonwealths, or our laws and customs. And if that's the case, then Americanism is a good thing. In other words, Pope Leo XIII was making clear, I'm not condemning the American way of life, nor am I condemning the American way of governance. So he made that very clear. However, he then went into various aspects of what he calls Americanism, and these he condemned. So here are some points. Americanism is condemned if it means what I'm about to enumerate. So the idea that the church should, quote, shape her teachings more in accord with the spirit of the age and relax some of her ancient severity and make some concessions to new opinions. Also, it could mean toning down or omitting certain points of Catholic teaching in order to attract non-Catholics. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Somewhere around the 1960s, I think that idea kind of crept into the American way of life. Americanism, according to Pope Leo XIII, quote, such liberty should be allowed in the church, that her supervision and watchfulness, being in some sense lessened, allowance should be granted the faithful, each one to follow out more freely the leading of his own mind and the trend of his own proper activity. So kind of a liberalism of the mind, or a liberty of the mind. Americanism could also mean, condemned, the idea regarding this liberty stems from the civil freedoms, which are now, quote, the right and foundation of almost every secular state. Also condemned, since the definition of papal infallibility has been set, so this is an idea of Americanism, because the definition of papal infallibility has been set, and since infallibility falls along a very narrow definition, man is free to believe and profess anything which does not fall within the strict confines of papal infallibility, things that have been defined through papal infallibility. So Pope Leo XIII was condemning that idea, but we've seen that creep into society recently, haven't we? Another condemned idea or aspect of Americanism. Man has the license and the, quote, right to hold whatever opinion one pleases upon any subject and to set them forth in print in the world. Where have we seen that before? Another aspect, that the, quote, Holy Spirit pours richer and more abundant graces today than formerly upon the souls of the faithful, so that without human intervention, he teaches or guides them by some hidden instincts of his own. And we've seen this in Pentecostalism. We've seen this in various aspects of this spirit of the age among post-conciliar Catholics. Another condemned idea. The natural virtues better respond to customs and necessities of the times and make man more ready to act and more strenuous, and in a more strenuous action. In other words, natural virtues are more efficacious and fruitful than supernatural virtues, which is kind of strange. It's a strange idea, but you see it a lot. He also condemned this idea. He said that the idea that there is a division between active and passive virtue. Now, passive virtue he condemns as an idea. He says rightly it's called angelic virtue, meaning contemplative virtues. Passive virtues are found in the past, and active virtues are found in this age. In short, the religious life is a thing of the past, whereas active ministry of all members of the church on all fronts is what is called for. So in other words, there's more activism, that's virtuous, and contemplation is a thing of the past and we need to do away with it. What's interesting is that Saul Alinsky said of contemplative orders in an interview that he gave, he said that if somebody thinks that they can go and pray in a monastery somewhere and not do anything to help mankind, well, at the end of his life, he thinks, meaning Saul Alinsky thinks, that the creator of the universe is going to look at him and in his judgment say, "Why, you cruddy bee." What a horrible thing to say. And then the last thing that I want to identify as Americanism, according to Pope Leo XIII, is that the church should be identified by its regions. In other words, there should be a church in America, which is different from a church in Germany, which is different from a church in China, or which is different from a church in the Amazon basin. Kind of interesting. Now, summing up Pope Leo XIII's thoughts, he wrote this, quote, "The underlying principle of these new opinions is that in order to more easily attract those who differ from her, the church should shape her teachings more in accord with the spirit of the age and relax some of her ancient severity and make some concessions to new opinions. Many think that these concessions should be made not only in regard to ways of living, but even in regard to doctrines which belong to the deposit of the faith. They contend that it would be opportune, in order to gain those who differ from us, to omit certain points of her teaching, which are of lesser importance, and to tone down the meaning with which the church has always attached to them." End quote. So in essence, Americanism is largely understood today as what we would normally call just liberal Catholicism. Can't you just hear Pope Francis in the Americanist call for the church to relax some of her ancient severity, or dare we say rigidity? Can't you hear America Magazine claim that man has a fundamental right to hold whatever opinion he pleases and to be able to put it into print? Can't you hear the National Catholic Reporter demanding that the church allow the faithful to follow out the leading of his own mind and trend on his own proper activity? Now, before anyone accuses me of claiming that Americanism is only infected in one party of the United States and not both, let me just say that there are many individual Catholics among the Democrats and the Republicans who are in fact infected with these notions. But only one of these two parties has actually enshrined these ideologies into their platform. And that's the reason why we singled out the Democrat Party for this particular program. So I'm going to bring Jim back, and he's going to talk about the historical background and context of Catholics in America and how Catholicism and the Democrat Party kind of formed an alliance. But before I do, I'm going to do a shameless plug here real quick. If you are enjoying what we're talking about and want to become a part of the Anchor team, it's only $15 a month. For $15 a month, it's 50 cents a day. You can join the Anchor team, help support what we do, help support our mission and our research, and just bringing a good message of the fullness of the faith to the faithful. So Jim is going to bring the next point. Jim, go right ahead.
Thanks a lot, Hitch. Now, it's important as we talk about Catholicism in the United States to understand that what this really was about was a seat at the table. As Pope Leo had admonished, actually very presciently, that going forward, in order to really have any influence, you'd have to get rid of that Catholic thing. So here's the context of the history and the background. Catholicism in the United States has been persecuted right from the beginning. The founders of our nation were mostly Protestant or deist, meaning that they were Freemasons or at least holding those beliefs. There was a strong anti-Catholic bias in the colony. Simply put, the colonists were mostly English, and they held Catholicism and its fidelity to the Church in Christ above all else was a threat to the vision of the New World. Further, it was societally acceptable to discriminate against Catholics. A few points. In 1642, Virginia enacted a law prohibiting Catholic settlers, just prohibited. 5 years later, in 1647, a similar statute was enacted by the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1649, the Act of Toleration was passed in Maryland. Now, this basically allowed Catholics to exist. But this law was repealed in 1654, making it once again illegal to be Catholic. By 1692, formerly Catholic Maryland established the Church of England and forced Catholics to pay taxes to support it. Catholics were not allowed to participate in the political process. Further, laws were passed outlawing the Mass, the sacraments of the Church, and Catholic schools. Also worth pointing out, Maryland, by its very nature, was started as a colony for Catholics to worship freely. And it turned around due to just this incredible amount of discrimination. Now, in 1788, John Jay urged the New York State legislature to require office holders to renounce the Pope and foreign authorities in all matters ecclesiastical as well as civil. Worth noting, he also included the Anglican Church along with the Catholics. Now, Great Britain, while governing the new colony, imposed a law not allowing Catholics to hold office or vote under British rule. This discrimination ended in theory, just in theory, with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But in reality, anti-Catholic bias was alive and well with the founding of our nation. The central belief was basically this: a pervasive belief that a Catholic could not be a true American given his perceived allegiance to the magisterium and the Pope in Rome. This bias was to remain in place for quite a while. Now, fast forward to the 19th century. The influx of immigrants from Catholic countries from the early 1800s to say around 1920 numbered at 30 million. That's fairly significant. Now, these people hailed from places like Ireland, Poland, Italy, Germany, etc. The majority of them, with the exception of Ireland, were not English speaking and were met with huge hostility. What was interesting was the response and support by the Catholic Church to this influx. The response centered around education initially. Protestantism was synonymous with American. And the education system was extremely representative of this. Now, men like Bishop John Hughes in New York, originally from Ireland, were quite effective at setting up alternative parallel education systems of primary and secondary schools. This system was a real force in the United States well into the 1970s. And the roots of it were based, basically, they were born out of a Catholic bias towards immigrants. His nickname was Dagger John, as he was called, and he was despised by the Protestant elite. In the early 1850s, in the middle of some brutal violence toward Catholics, he actually armed some parishioners in the old St. Patrick's Cathedral and publicly warned that Catholics would not stand by as they were being victimized. He further warned that New York City would burn into a second Moscow if any Catholics were harmed. Again, worth noting, because of men like Hughes and other Catholic leaders, bishops, or senior members of the church, they withdrew from the public school system and they created quite a robust parallel school system for Catholics. Now, again, fast forward again to give you some context. The Ku Klux Klan was formed in 1860 to combat the end of slavery and terrorize the Black community. They experienced a rebirth in the early 20th century, predominantly to combat Jewish and Catholic immigrants. They still hated Blacks, but their scope was expanded to hate anybody who was not white or whom they perceived as threatening the whiteness and Protestantism of America. It appeared, all things considered, that by 1924, with Al Smith running for president, Catholics were firmly entrenched in the New World. Anti-Catholic bias, however, was not over. Like it or not, Catholics would be a force to contend with in the New World. But the point is, Al Smith, and most historians agree, a major part of this was due to his Catholicism. But worth noting, simply being represented on the ticket was an achievement in one sense. It was a clear representation of the idea that Catholics had no place in the public square due to the perception and loyalty to the church. Now, fast forward again further, because I think this is a really huge moment, and you've heard Michael Hitchborn talk about this quite a bit. One could argue that the election of, in quotes, Catholic JFK in 1962 was a direct result of studying the principle of distancing oneself from Catholicism and engaging in, frankly, evil theological and intellectual gymnastics to address the issue. Enter Father Robert Drinan, Dean of Boston College Law School, at the famous Hyannisport meeting at the Kennedy compound, where they codified the heretical, while I'm personally opposed to fill in the blank abortion, as a Catholic, this can be separated from my public duties. I took this quote from the National Catholic Register because I think it nailed it in January 2nd, 2009. Mr. Johnson writes that the Hyannisport colloquium was influenced by the position of another Jesuit, the Reverend John Courtney Murray, a position that distinguished between the moral aspects of an issue and the feasibility of enacting legislation about that issue. It was the consensus at the Hyannisport Conclave, that Catholic politicians might tolerate legislation that would permit abortion under certain circumstances, if political efforts to repress the moral error led to greater perils to social peace and order. But the anti-Catholic movement was hardly over in the earliest 20th centuries. I can think of no greater example of Leo XIII's admonitions as to the mortal danger of Americanism than this example. In order to get its seat at the table of power in the United States, the message was clear: denounce your Catholicism. Now, as anyone with a conscience knows, and we certainly underline today, you cannot separate your Catholicism from any thought, action, or decision. None. They're inseparable. Okay. The logic manufactured at the Kennedy compound was seminal to a whole new generation of Catholic politicians, misleading not only the faithful but the world. Leo XIII warned about this, and he was exactly right. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Hitchborn. You there, Hitch?
Yes, I am. Okay. So, with a little bit of background on the rise of democratic ideologies within the Catholic Church in America, and understanding it with the backdrop of what Americanism is, you can start to see that Americanism kind of shaped and formed what we kind of know today as liberal Catholicism. And you can see how, as Father Drinan and the Hyannisport meeting got together, what they did is they started to shape and mold the Democrat Party according to their liberal Catholic ideologies. Okay, so it was kind of a symbiotic relationship, because you can see that the Democrats were infiltrated by socialists in the very early part of the 20th century. It was actually one of the key points of what the communists had desired to do. If you look at Woodrow Wilson, for instance, even though the Democrats or the communists hadn't gained control of Russia by this point, Woodrow Wilson, he was a socialist. The guy was a complete and total Marxist. But you don't really think about it in those terms, because socialism and communism weren't really an active political threat to the United States until after the rise of the Soviet Union. Well, fast forward. You look at what Lenin and Stalin and these gentlemen had been trying to put forward, and what they were instituting, and so far as how to infiltrate political parties. One of the goals of the of the communists was to take control of a political party in the United States. And the party that they got control of was most definitely the Democrats. They got them. Okay. So now what we want to do is we kind of want to take this idea and shape it a little bit more and say, okay, so you have Americanism. It's established as a kind of a liberal Catholic ideology that has married itself or associated itself with a political platform in the Democrat Party. And as that has taken shape, you've now started to see the influence of socialism, the influence of communism, and these ideologies that kind of come into it. So you have a theological as well as a political motivation kind of intermarrying in this movement in the United States. And as we're going to look at a little bit later, what you're going to see is that the Democrat Party, the platform is completely and totally incompatible with Catholic teaching. But what we're going to call for, and what we do call for, is the complete and total condemnation of the Democrat Party altogether as irreconcilable with Catholic teaching, because the party itself is absolutely irreconcilable. Renee says I'm cutting out. Am I cutting out?
Yeah, it could be her internet connection. I think I hear you loud and clear. If anyone else is having a problem, please speak up. I'll keep an eye on it, Itch.
Okay, thanks. All right. Now, moving right along, I want to set a precedent here. The precedent is that the Catholic Church has completely and totally condemned political parties in the past. And there is no reason why they couldn't do the same thing with the Democrat Party today. The example I'm going to use, 1931, the Bishops' Conference of Germany excommunicated the leaders of the Nazi Party and forbade any Catholic from being a member. Following the decree of the Bishops' Conference, a National Socialist newspaper titled Der Hessian asked the Bishop's Curia of Mainz if the Bishop of Mainz had actually forbidden Catholics from being members of the Nazi Party, or if Nazis were forbidden from participating in funerals and so forth, and if Catholics who were enrolled as members of the Nazi Party were to be denied the sacraments. So in his response, it was a 4-page response, he cited various aspects of the Nazi Party platform, and he cited paragraph 24 in 3 different parts. So in the first part, he cites paragraph 24, which says, "We advocate the freedom of the state of all religious confessions as long as they do not endanger her safety," meaning the safety of Germany. So the bishop then asks, which religious denominations endanger the security of the state? There was a time when Germany considered the Catholic religion to be dangerous for the state. It was the era of the Kulturkampf, in which there was in the so-called national circles to oppress the Catholic Church by all means. And then he cites paragraph 24 in the second part. Remember, these are the paragraphs of the platform of the Nazi Party. This second part says, we give the freedom in the state of all religious confessions, insofar as they do not run counter to the morality and moral sense of the Germanic race. Now, it's very broad, okay, very general. So the bishop asks, what is meant by the morality and moral sense of the Germanic race? What is the attitude of this Germanic morality and morality in comparison with Christian morality? Christian morality is founded upon love of neighbor. National Socialist writers do not recognize this precept in the sense taught by Christ. They preach the over-valorization of the Germanic race and devalue all foreign races. This devaluation, that for many reaches to the full hatred of foreign races, is anti-Christian and anti-Catholic. Christian morality is also universal. It is valid for all times and for all races. It is therefore a grave mistake to demand that the Christian religion conform to the morality and moral sense of the Germanic race. Furthermore, in religious matters, it is not the sentiment that must decide, but reason and will. And then he goes on to cite the third part of paragraph 24 of the Nazi program, which says, the party as such stands for a positive Christianity without binding itself to any particular religious confession. Sounds an awful lot like indifferentism, doesn't it? We ask, What is meant by positive Christianity? The leaders of the National Socialist Party want a German God, a German Christianity, a German church. He goes on to point out the pagan ideologies of the kind of Christianity proposed by the Nazis, and at the end of his 4-page response, the bishop concludes with this. He says, "It is true that Hitler, in his book, Mein Kampf, wrote some respectful words for the Christian religion and for Catholic institutions, but this does not take away the conviction that the political culture of National Socialism is in antithesis with Catholic Christianity." The above quotations contain the answer to the question, can a Catholic be a registered member of Hitler's party? Can a Catholic parish priest allow members of this party to cooperate or to take part in religious funerals or other functions? Can a Catholic who professes the principles of this party be admitted to the holy sacraments? We have to answer negatively. In other words, the bishop absolutely condemned and forbade Catholics from being a member of a political party. But he did so because of the immorality and the antithesis of its teachings to Catholic moral and theological teaching. So the precedent for condemning a political party, which had fallen into moral and theological error, grave moral and theological error, would then absolutely prohibit a Catholic from being a member. And he did it on those principles. In short, the Nazi Party was forcefully condemned and Catholics were forbidden from being members because of the party platform. Following this, in 1938, most people don't know this, the Archbishop of Utrecht in the Netherlands condemned the Nazi Party and also forbade supporters from Holy Communion. He said this, quote, "We remain convinced that the church and our country will be grievously damaged, and the fulfilling task of bringing grace will be rendered impossible when the Nazi movement gets the upper hand. Therefore, we shepherds of your souls, in full knowledge of our responsibility, declare that those who materially support this movement will be banned from the sacraments." And also, along with the Nazi Party, guess who else was condemned? The Communist Party. And membership and support in it was also forbidden. In fact, it still is. In 1949, the Sacred Congregation for the Holy Office, which is now called the Prefect for the Congregation of the Faith, issued a decree answering 4 questions related to the Catholic participation in communism. First, I'll give you the questions, and then I'll give you the answers. Question 1, whether it is lawful to enlist or show favor to the Communist Party. 2, whether it is lawful to publish, read, or disseminate books, newspapers, periodicals, or leaflets in support of communist doctrine and practice or write in any articles within them. Question 3, whether Catholics who knowingly and freely place actions as specified in numbers 1 and 2 may be admitted to the sacraments. And then question 4, whether Catholics who profess, and particularly those who defend and spread, the materialistic and anti-communist doctrine of the communists, ipso facto, as apostates from the Catholic faith. Now that is a key point. As apostates from the Catholic faith, incur excommunication reserved specifically to the Holy See. This is extremely serious. The response to question 1, in the negative, meaning it is not lawful for a Catholic to enlist or show favor to the Communist Party. And the answer says, for communism is materialism and anti-Christian. Besides, communist leaders, although they sometimes verbally assert that they are not opposed to religion, show themselves nevertheless by both doctrine and by action to be in reality enemies of God, of the true religion, and of the Church of Christ. Question 2, in the negative. In other words, they answered it in the negative. And the question, remember, was whether it was lawful to publish and read and disseminate articles that support communist doctrine. So the answer is in the negative. They are not allowed to do these things, inasmuch as this is prohibited by law itself. See Canon 1399. So the office specified that this was already condemned. It's already been answered, and you can look at canon law and it'll define it. Question 3, in the negative. And remember, question 3 was whether Catholics who knowingly and freely place themselves in the actions specified in numbers 1 and 2, being a member of the Communist Party or disseminating and writing things that propagate communist doctrine, whether they would be admitted to the sacraments. So it answers in the negative, meaning they are not to be admitted to the sacraments, in accordance with common principles governing refusal of sacraments to those not having proper dispositions. And number 4, in the affirmative. Remember, the question for number 4 was whether those who profess, and particularly those who defend and spread materialist and anti-Christian doctrine of the communists, whether they are ipso facto apostates from the faith, and if they incur automatic excommunication from the Holy See. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Those who profess communist doctrine or participate and advocate for the Communist Party are automatically excommunicated as apostates. That is the highest form of excommunication. 2 days after this decree was issued, Pope Pius XII ordered it to be published in the Acta Apostolicae Sedis, which means that it has the binding force of the universal magisterium, and it is still in effect. It has never been abrogated, and it cannot be abrogated. So you have the Communist Party being condemned and Catholics being forbidden from being members, and you have the Nazi Party, which is condemned, and Catholics are forbidden from being its members. And what Jim is going to talk about is how this should also apply to the Democrat Party, and he's going to go over why. But before I turn it over to him, I have to do this. It's a crass commercial message. If you'd like to be a member of the Anchor team, it's $15 a month. If you enjoy this conversation, if you enjoy the work that we're doing and what we're putting together and the work that we put into actually talking to you guys and bringing you this kind of information and all the investigations that we do at the Lepanto Institute, you would be supporting us in a major way by joining the Anchor team. Just $15 a month. So you can join by going to lepantoin.org/anchor-team. And I would also add, if you could please just give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And when the subscribe button comes up on YouTube, be sure to click the little bell to make sure that you get notifications when we have a new video coming out, because YouTube hates our algorithm and they don't want to support us. They don't want us to have this message. It would be extremely helpful if you could help spread the word by pushing the like button, the subscription button, and sharing and liking our video everywhere you possibly can. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jim, and he's going to tell you about the Democrat Party and why the Democrat Party should absolutely be condemned by the Catholic Church.
Thanks a lot, Hitch. Now, the platform of the Democratic Party, look, I was somebody who grew up and lived in New York City or the New York City area, and it was always a constant source of fascination to me. How precisely could someone claim to be a Democrat and simultaneously Catholic? The Democratic Party my entire life seemed to be on the front and center of issues that were unequivocally non-Catholic. Just a couple of examples. The obvious one is the Democratic Party seemed to be a huge proponent of wealth redistribution, or as I call it accurately, stealing. The Democratic Party seemed to be the first to vociferously support abortion, a clear example of murder, and again, not Catholic. They seem to consistently have the worst ideas. These ideas were rarely Catholic, and I marveled how they were able to put it forth in this atmosphere of collusion with the media and this monolithic drum. Just starting in the 1990s, I pulled a couple out. AIDS is everyone's issue. We're all at risk. Give us your power and money and we'll take care of it. No, it didn't turn out that we weren't all at risk, and it was overwhelmingly homosexual men. Abortion's not a human being. It's a woman's right. These are the ones that our hierarchy's in bed with. Try debating this point. Give them an armload of facts, and just like AIDS, no one cares. Gender is a social construct. We have to, these people need to be corrected, not have masses said with them celebrating it. Don't wear a diaper on your face. Wear a diaper on your face, or you'll kill grandma. Oh yeah, take this thing in your arm. You're not allowed to go to the grocery store. Follow the science, you hillbilly rube. Anyway, just an overall arching thing is that the societal ills are all to be viewed not from a perspective of personal accountability, but from a power hierarchy that must be dismantled. There is no competence hierarchy. Anyone apparently can be a brain surgeon, and if you're not, the clear and obvious explanation is racism. This is what our hierarchy is really in bed with. I just picked out a few examples, and that's it. So to begin with, let's get to the nuts and bolts of this. The specific Democratic platform, and Hitch and I pulled out both the platform of 2016 and 2020. Now, the 2020 platform was 92 pages. Spoiler alert, it's brutal to read. I had to walk around the block a couple times to take a break. I'm going to give you the punchline first. Anyone who claims to be both Catholic and Democrat is a perfect example of what Leo XIII was warning us about. The platform of the Democratic Party reads like the perfect game plan for reason when we divorce faith from it and we take God out. It's the crown jewel of what happens when we take enlightenment, and free Masonic principles and join them together. We concentrate on things like the brotherhood of man. We have other words for it, and we produce godless policies, wrapped in secular virtue, and it's actually evil. And we make certain that we have no foundation of moral and natural law with Christ as king, societally and spiritually. Then we add a heaping cup of man's incessant need for wealth and power by way of our political process, and voila, the platform of the Democratic Party. Now, pay particular attention to the veiled, sort of duplicitous language indicating concern for the welfare of the common man, and the striking identical Marxist roots. Every aspect of societal life the government has conveniently provided an answer for. Forget the track record of, obviously wasteful spending and conspicuous incompetence. And if you bring that up, you're a racist. Also pay attention to the adjectives describing these policies. Fair and equitable, just, for example, means wealth redistribution of your money, of course. Now, to the platform, and I'm talking specifically the 2020 presidential platform. There are 10 main, call them objectives, with various subgroups under each one of the 10 headings. Let's begin with the opening. First title, Chapter 1, Building a Stronger, Fairer Economy. Okay. First point, I think it was point number 1, protecting workers and families and creating millions of jobs across America. Sounds good, right? Well, I'm sorry, but the government doesn't create jobs. They create inefficient government departments that never die. The worker gets nothing, right? And I could back that with chapter and verse. Point number 2, raising wages and promoting workers' rights. Okay, raising wages. Sounds great, right? Sounds actually just. Okay, this is proven to kill jobs. Any first-year economics student can tell you that. I mean, just look at the restaurant industry. When you raise the minimum wage, they go out of business. Point number 3, enacting robust workforce family policies. Investing in the engines of job creation. I love this one. Again, take your money and we're going to handle everything for you. Just hand over your freedom. Okay, so you're gonna invest in the engines of job creation, like, let's just say, like Obama did with Solyndra. More than $500 million for solar panels. We don't have any solar panels. The money's gone. It's absolutely gone. It was absolutely a joke. The government has a track record of, we're going to wake up to this. They have a track record of absolute incompetence. Building a fair system of international trade for our workers. Next one, putting homeowners in reach and guaranteeing safe housing for every American. Again, sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It's absolutely stupid. See the mortgage crisis of 2007, and which was fed and nourished by the Clintons' Community Reinvestment Act. No, not everyone should own a home. Okay, they not only should they, and many cannot. And I mean, this was such a fallacy. And think about it too. They're always trying to. The Democratic Party is always trying, and the Catholic hierarchy is on board, talk about societal injustice and how they have an answer for it. And a lot of this stuff is just manufactured. All right, point number, I think it was 10, leveling the economic playing field, right there alone. What are you going to do about that? Reforming the tax code to benefit working families. All right, again, that's just another reach to grab more money and keep it out of the hands of people who are willing to take risk and actually spend that money by their own volition. I love this one. Next one, ending poverty. That literally is one of their line items. I love this. You idiots did the Great Society under LBJ. How did that work out? They were going to end society then. I would argue that particularly the African American community got decimated from the Great Society. What that set up was in their welfare plan and things like Section 8 housing, that set up literally decades and decades of guaranteed, shall we say, mediocrity and no advancement. The sad part is, if you read Thomas Sowell, he's at the Hoover Institution. He's a senior fellow. Any one of his books. The saddest part about that was, prior to the Great Society, the African American community was on its way up. I mean, by every measure. And I mean, oh man, it's unbelievable. Protecting consumer rights and privacy. Again, we're going to spend money and take care of your life. Tackling runaway corporate concentration. I'm not sure what that means. I read it. It was actually stupid. Guaranteeing a secure and dignified retirement. Again, not the government's job. That's my job. That's your job. Next chapter. Achieving, this is great, achieving universal affordable quality healthcare. You know where I'm going with this, right? Securing universal healthcare through a public option. An absolute disaster, right? Again, this is a power grab. This is what these people want. Bringing down the price of drugs and taking on the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, I think there's some relevance there, but their plan, again, is, because I read through it, is a ridiculous one where it's going to cost them a lot of money and get nothing done. I think the objective is good. Reducing healthcare costs and improving healthcare quality. Expanding access to mental health and substance abuse treatments. Expanding long-term care and supports. And here we go, this one. Eliminate racial, gender, and geographic health inequities. I mean, really? Protecting Native American health. All right? I mean, like, they're the candy man. They're going to cover everything. Just give us your money. This is great. Now, here's the one that ought to concern you. Securing reproductive health rights and justice. Okay, that's abortion. That's what that is. So we want to make sure that we're going to secure reproductive health rights and justice. There's that word again. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're also supposed to pay, and everybody, for whatever reason, should be able to have an abortion at any time, and many up until 9 months. Next one, protecting and promoting maternal health. That's funny. I thought we wanted to kill them. Next one, protecting LGBTQ health. Okay, so we have a group of people that have defined themselves by a sexual act, right? And now we're going to corral them, and then we should actually spend money to make sure that this particular group that defines themselves by a sexual act has adequate health care. And how exactly are they going to do that? Next one, strengthening and supporting the healthcare workforce. Okay, right. And investing in health science and research. They've never done it before. Okay, next chapter. Protecting communities and building trust by reforming our criminal justice system. I'm sorry, this is hilarious. You were the idiots who wanted to defund the police. And how about Minneapolis and Portland? How did that work out when they were burning those cities down? When you look at this, when you look at quite literally the stats of all these major blue cities, the murder rate has gone through the roof because of exactly these kinds of policies. I mean, these people are terrifying. Next chapter, again, love the title. Healing the Soul of America. This is on their platform. Protecting America's civil rights. Who could argue with that, right? But I don't know if I really don't know if it's a big problem. Achieving racial justice and equity. The government's going to do that. And how are they going to define that? Well, they're going to define it very simply by where they are at the end of the spectrum. They're talking about equal outcome. Next one, protecting women's rights. That's abortion. Next one, protecting LGBTQ rights. That's so they can make sure that they're allowed to read these perverts to your children at the local library. Protecting disability rights. Okay, sure. Honoring indigenous tribal nations. Next one, ending violence against women. Who's for violence for women? I mean, really, and why particularly women, right? And here's my favorite. Ending the epidemic of gun violence. Now, these rocket scientists just gave 360,000 fully automatic M4s with scopes and night vision goggles in order to kill Christians in the dark effectively. And you want to take away my AR-15. I thought self-defense is a Catholic principle. Tons of bishops are on board with this. Next one. Supporting faith and service. That one is, of course, assuming your particular religion will fund child murder. Next one. Supporting press freedom. Press freedom. Okay, let's just, the irony of this, let's just let that hang there for a minute. This is ridiculous. This is the party that has murdered freedom of speech mercilessly. Okay, just a few examples. Are you kidding me? How about the cerveza disease? How about the Hunter Biden laptop? How about anyone who has disagreed with them, with the Democratic Party? I'm sorry.
Let's add to this. You know, as we were talking, let's add to this. What was it that Pope Leo XIII was talking about with regard to Americanism? That anybody, he condemned this idea, remember, that anybody can hold any idea and have it published in public. Yes. Now, a lot of Americans, and this includes Republicans, will bristle at this idea that freedom of speech and freedom of the press is an absolute right. That they'll bristle at the idea that this is not an absolute right. And in fact, it's an anti-Catholic idea. Why? Because evil has no rights. Yes. Evil has no rights. And nobody has a right to publish and foster false ideologies. No one. So this is why also when communism was condemned, one of the elements of the condemnation was that people who are promoting and writing in communist literature, promoting communist leaflets, promoting communist books, those people were not to be admitted to the sacraments. And it all goes back to the idea that freedom of the press is not a real right according to the teachings of the church. It is not. You do not have a right to hold a false idea, and you do not have a right to propagate that false idea in the public sphere. Right. It is not a right.
Nope.
So the freedom of the press, the freedom of the idea of free speech is not absolute. So it's an Americanist idea, but what did the Democrats just do? They enshrined it in their platform. They enshrined it in their platform. To my knowledge, and somebody can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, even though many Republicans do espouse this idea of freedom of the press and freedom of speech, they've not enshrined it in the platform of the Republican Party, if I'm not mistaken. I could be. But this is one of those things where, okay, it's quite possible that you have two members of the general American public, two parties, both espousing the same Americanist ideology, and we as Catholics have to be careful not to fall into that trap. So communism is condemned because of freedom of the press on one hand, and the Democrat Party, in that very same document, which was condemned by Pope Leo XIII on Americanism, they in their platform espoused it as a right. Going back to what you had said about abortion, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, all these perversions, pushing for the public funding of contraception. Okay, that's in there too. All of those things are thoroughly and totally condemned by the Catholic Church. There is no way that a Catholic could be in the Democrat Party. No way.
No way. No way. Yeah.
But even more to the point, it's funny. Church Militant did a report recently. I think it was last summer, actually, where they were able to go through party registration cards, because many of them are of public record. And they were able to point out, hey, we found a bunch of bishops that are registered Democrats. This is a scandal.
Yes.
This is a real scandal because of the nature of the Democrat Party. Its platform is completely and totally inimical to Catholic teaching. Absolutely.
Across the board, Hitch. Every item I've gone through, you can make that argument. And some are so obvious. You're like, how could you guys be doing this?
Sure. Well, and then of course, when you're talking about their fiscal policies, oh, we want to have fair this, and we want to have equal opportunity that, and we want to have basically raises for everybody, and we're going to give a chicken in every pot.
Yes, and they're based on equal outcome, Marxism.
Yeah, it is Marxism.
Absolutely,
it was Marxism. If you line it up with the planks of communism, it is absolutely the same. And so, because the Communist Party was condemned on those principles, materialism, redistribution of wealth, absolutely condemned on those principles, the Democrat Party can and should and must be condemned at the same time. And it is a scandal that there are bishops who are Democrats. It's a scandal that the President of the United States is a Catholic and a Democrat.
Right.
It is a scandal that people like Carolyn Wu, the former head of Catholic Relief Services, and Jimmy Martin, the most prominent Jesuit in the Western world, are going around and promoting Biden for president.
Yes.
They were Catholics for Biden, right? Jimmy Martin gave the big speech at the Democrat convention promoting Joe Biden. Sister Simone Campbell was the one who she gave a speech promoting Democrat Joe Biden. These people, by their very relationship to this entity,
yes,
I think, fall under the same excommunication of apostasy that Pope Leo XII or Pope Pius XII indicated in the decree in 1949. I think that they are the same.
I could not agree with you more.
So
go ahead, sorry.
The bottom line is, at least insofar as I'm concerned, and people are free to debate this, they're free to disagree with me on this, but the Democrat Party is so anti-Catholic, even to the same degree as the condemnation of Nazism, yes, according to what the Bishop of Mainz wrote. They are so opposed to Catholicism and the Catholic Church that it is impossible for a Catholic to be a member of the Democrat Party. And in fact, they should be excommunicated by being a member.
Hitch, let me jump in. So just on the ones I read, and by the way, almost every line item, you can make that argument. LGBTQ rights, abortion, equal outcome. Are you out of your mind? I would say this is a major part of their platform. How can you possibly justify that? How can you, or even take it a step further? BLM is not the Democratic Party, but was it Sites in El Paso?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. A BLM sign. I mean, this is a Marxist organization.
BLM
what has happened?
BLM stands for Bishops Love Money.
Yeah. Right. That was an excellent meme on your part, by the way. I had to give you credit for that.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And, it's interesting to look at the condemnation of liberal or of Americanism, according to Pope Leo XIII, and look at what the Democrats are proposing and what they're promoting and see how absolutely tied in they are.
I can't, again, that's why this topic was so tight. You go right to that. This is what he warned about. These guys they're not even recognizably Catholic.
No.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And I was just going to say, and the tie-in that you brought up where, the Hyannisport meeting where, Father Drinan Father Drinan came up with this idea that, well, you can be personally opposed.
That was diabolical.
And that's how you can get around it, right? So by claiming that you're personally opposed, but Pope Leo XIII condemned that idea. Mm-hmm. That there is a separation between one's actions and one's beliefs. You can't divide the two. You also look at the freedom of the academic freedom as espoused at the the Land O'Lakes conference.
Land O'Lakes conference, right?
Okay, you remember Land O'Lakes?
Yep. And
you know who was there drafting that?
Hesburgh?
No, well, Hesburgh was a part of it, but who actually drafted it?
McCarrick?
He's on trial right now.
Yeah. I got it on the second guess.
Yeah, you did. So you can start to see the tie-in of the perverts.
Yes.
And Drinan, by the way, Drinan was an adamant pro-abort. The man was awful. He was awful. He was the only Catholic priest to ever be a member of Congress, and he was dreadful. So and every time he went up to vote, oh, he was wearing his clerics.
Yes.
Isn't that sweet?
Wait, what about the Berrigans?
The which?
The Berrigan brothers, weren't they in Congress as Catholic priests? I might be wrong.
Yeah, they were, but I think that
they got yanked. I think the Pope also made them resign.
Yeah.
Okay, I see your point. Right.
And Drinan was also told to resign, but he refused.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. So anyway, you can look at the tie-in between Americanism, the Democrat Party, the condemnations of Nazism and communism. They all go together and they form a complete whole. They form a complete idea. And that complete idea equals apostasy, as identified by Pius XII. There's got to be a movement. And I think that if some brave bishop out there, tell you what, here's a challenge, you guys. Any one of you knows a good bishop, play for him this video where we go through the condemnations of the various political parties that we talked about. We talk about Americanism, where those ideologies were condemned. We tied them in with the Democrat Party platform. We showed how the Democrat Party platform is as evil as the Communist Party platform and the Nazi Party platform.
Right.
Those were condemned. Play this video for them. Have them examine our materials, examine our thoughts and our logical process. And then ask them, Your Excellency, why can you not in your own diocese condemn Catholic membership or participation in the Democrat Party? Can you do that? Will you do that? It would be very interesting to see what kind of response you get.
Great point. That is a great point. And Hitch, if I could make one point, I made it through most of the platform. I spoke very fast. Probably got to about 70, 80%. The rest is the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm saying, like, I took the high points out. The only thing else I would add is, they want to make DC a state because obviously they want to stack the deck. And then there's the whole issue of Catholic Charities having in the business of immigration, which I'd wrap it up. But that's another story for another show. But anyway, I wanted to make that point. I literally went through the majority of the Democratic Party platform.
Right.
So we covered it, and there you have it, folks. I just want to make that point. There's no, nothing else really to add.
Right. So there it is. That's my challenge to you guys. If you have a good bishop that you think would be open to at least hearing this idea that the Democrat Party should be condemned from a Catholic standpoint and that Catholics should be forbidden from being members of the Democrat Party, I think that you should issue that challenge to your bishop and say, Your Excellency, I would like to know whether you would be willing to condemn the Democrat Party and forbid Catholics from being members. And if you are not, please explain to me why not. Because it was done here in Germany, it was done here in the Netherlands, and it was done on a world stage by the Pope with regard to communism. So there it is. And with that, folks, we're going to wrap up the show. If you enjoyed our conversation, if you really want to support what we're doing and the kind of research that we do here, especially the reports that we put out on a regular basis, please join the Lepanto Institute Anchor Team. It's $15 a month. It's only 50 cents a day. You can do that by going to lepantoin.org/anchor-team. In the meantime, please mash that like button, hit share, hit subscribe. When you hit subscribe, be sure to click the little bell that says, I want to be notified every time a new video comes up, because that's the only way that we're going to get YouTube to beat the algorithm. They're never going to promote our materials. So you can actually help us fight YouTube by clicking the like, clicking the subscribe button, and sharing it with all of your friends and family, getting them to watch the video. And don't forget, let your bishop know too. So with that, let's go ahead and close with our prayer.
You got it, Hitch.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostri. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory,
Pray for us.
in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. God bless you all, and I hope to see you all and some new faces next week. Have
You
a
got
great
it. Thank you
weekend.
so much.